in this lesson, we are going to start to talk about expressions. You're going to see a lot of new vocabulary words in this lesson, and it's going to seem a little overwhelming at first, but please don't be too overwhelmed. It's going to take a lot of practice for you to understand these things, so just listen, try to put them into practice, and if you don't understand all of it, I need you to know that it's okay, because like I said, practice is the only way that we're going to work through this, and this is just the first lesson of many. Alright, so let's get started by talking about the difference between a numerical expression and an algebraic expression. So numerical expressions are things that you've done for most of your mathematical career. 3 plus 4, 2 parentheses 3 plus 7, 18 divided by 6. A numerical expression contains only numbers, and that's something that you're very much used to. You know how to solve a numerical expression. But something that I'm going to introduce you to is an algebraic expression. An algebraic expression contains a variable, and I'm going to tell you what a variable is in just a minute, but you can pretty much take a guess. A variable is a letter, okay? It does not always have to be X. In these examples I used X, but it can be absolutely any letter from the alphabet. So the letter represents a number, and we will get to what that number is in the next unit, but for now, this is what an algebraic expression will look like. 2x plus 3, 3 parentheses 4x minus 5, or 1/3 x. So the difference between numerical and algebraic is numerical is only numbers, and algebraic has a letter in it. Alright, so there's 4 big vocabulary words that you need to know and that we're going to cover today. The first one is a constant. A constant is a value that does not change. The easiest way to think of a constant is that it's the number that's by itself in an algebraic expression. So here I have the number 4 circled. The number 4 is on its own. There's no letter attached to it. It's just sort of hanging out by itself on the other side of the plus sign. Okay? Then we have something called a variable, which I touched on in the last slide. A variable is a symbol used to represent a number, and usually that symbol is simply a letter. We oftentimes use X, we use Y a lot, we use W, but you can use any letter that you want to unless I specifically tell you to use a letter. Okay, and so a variable is simply a letter that we use to represent a number. Then, a coefficient. So a coefficient and a constant are 2 things that students get confused most often. So let me review constant one more time. Constant is by itself on its own, okay? Coefficient is a value being multiplied with a variable. So let me simplify that. A coefficient is a number that is in front of a variable. It is attached to a variable. See this 4 over here? This 4 is the constant. It's by itself. The 2 over here, it's attached to the variable. That's a coefficient, okay? It's not by itself. It's attached to the variable. It wants a friend, okay? So a coefficient, and you can think of the word co means together, okay? It's together with the variable. Alright, and then we have term. And term is an element or a number in an expression. So terms you can think of as a unit. So in math, we have different units that we learn. So a term is a different unit in an expression, and they're usually separated by plus signs and minus signs. So the 2x is one term. Then I have a plus sign. Then here's a 4. Then if I had another plus sign and I had a 7y, this would be another term. And so it's just the different parts of the expression. And we're going to take a deeper look into that in just a minute. And let's do that right now. So here's some examples. And what I want to do is I want to pull these apart and look at the 4 vocabulary words more closely. So what are the constants in this example 1? 5m plus 2 plus 6. So the constants are the numbers by themselves. So we have 2 and we have 6. Those are the constants, okay? What are the variables? I have m. What are my coefficients? So what's the number, the co? It's together with something, together with the variable. What's the number in front of the variable? 5. And then last, what are my terms? And so what I like to do is I like to draw a box around my terms. So that's one term, okay? Here's another term, and here's another term. So 5m, 2, and 6. Those are my terms. All right, let's take a look at example number 2. So I'm going to start with my constants again, my numbers that are by themselves. So I have a 3 and I have a 14. And you'll notice that the 3 is positive and the 14 is positive. Okay, I want to point that out real quick. What are my variables? I have a y. Sometimes I'll have more than one variable. What are my coefficients? Remember, co means together. Okay, so do I have anything that's together with the variable? So here I have a 2, okay? So I have a 2, but there's also one that, oh, and I forgot to circle my variables. There's also one that is invisible that you cannot see, and it's right here. It's an invisible number 1. Anytime you have a variable that's by itself, there's an invisible number 1 in front of it. We just don't write it, but it's going to be very important going forward that you know that, okay? And then last but not least, what are our terms? So again, I like to box those off. Because they make it easier for me. So I have 3. I have y, and if you want to put 1y, if it makes you feel better, that's fine. 14 and 2y. Okay, let's take a look at another example here. Okay, so what are my constants? 7. What are my variables? Okay, so I have x. What are my coefficients? Remember, co means together. So what's together with the variable? I have 36. And I have 5. And then what are my terms? So let me box them off. So I have 36x, 5x, and 7. All right, example number 4, we have something new in here. So first, what are my constants? I have 23, and I have 9. What are my variables? I have p. What are my coefficients? Okay, remember, co means together with something. So I have 9. And then remember, I told you there's an invisible 1 here. But the answer is not 1 because look at the sign in front of it. That's a minus sign. See how all the others have plus signs? So it's actually a negative 1. Very, very important. Very important. Okay? Last but not least, what are my terms? I like to box them off. And I'm going to pause before I get to the last one. When you have a minus sign, the minus sign is part of your term. So when I go to write my terms, it's 23, 9, 9p, and negative p, or negative 1p, if that makes you feel better. That minus sign acts as a negative. It's very important. Let's try another example. What are my constants? Okay, look here. What's my constant here? Is it positive 2 or negative 2? It's negative 2. That minus sign is very important. You're going to notice I'm going to add more of those in. All right. What's my variable? I have x. What's my coefficient? Remember, co means together with something. Okay, so I have a 9 and I have a 6. And then what are my terms? And I like to box those off because it helps me see them better. But when I have a minus sign, that's included with my term. So I have 9x, 6x, and minus 2. All right, next example. What are my constants? My numbers by themselves. I have 12. And what's my last one? Be careful. Negative 3, because there's a minus sign in front of it. What are my variables? I have two of them, but they're the same thing, m. What are my coefficients? Remember, co means together. So I have a 4, and I have a, be careful, -2. And then last but not least, what are my terms? I'm going to box them off. Make sure you take the minus sign when you need it. So my terms are 12, 4m, -2m, and -3. All right, you try these two. All right, let's go over it. Hit pause if you're not done. For the first one, your constant is 7. Your variables, you have two of them, w and h. Your coefficients are 8 and -3 because there's a minus sign in front of that 3. Your terms are 8w, again -3h, and +7. For the next one, your constants are 9 and -5. You have two variables, x and y. Your coefficients, that's the number in front of the variable, is 13 and -9. And then your terms are 9, 13x, -9y, and -5. All right, that's the end of this lesson. We're going to do some more practice in class, but remember, if it's a little confusing, that's okay. We're going to practice over the whole unit.